So we are going to begin by just simply introducing ourselves. So I'm Lori. I think I know everybody from Temple, and happy July. I'll call on people, and if you could just share what you teach, where you're from, and like a sentence about your involvement in Inside Out, that would be great. Jennifer, why don't we start with you?
Yes. So you said, what was it? The sentence for what?
Of your involvement with Inside Out.
Let me go last. Sorry. Okay. My name's Jennifer Kobina Denji. I've been teaching. I got to come back to you. Sorry.
We'll come back to you. Okay. Joe?
Hi, I'm Joe Schwartz. I'm from Philadelphia. I was an Inside student back in 2014, and through all the twists and turns of life, I've been able to be involved in the Inside Out Training Institute since we went virtual, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Welcome, Joe. Leanne?
Hi, everyone. I'm Leanne Trapito-Sims. I'm a professor of peace and justice at Knox College, where I teach at the nearby Henry Hill Correctional Center in Inside Out in restorative justice and life writing.
Okay, thank you. Tanya Whittle?
Hey folks, I'm Tanya Whittle. I am in Wilmington, Delaware, and teach at the women's facility and the men's facility for University of Delaware Sociology and Criminal Justice departments. Also work with prison educators from throughout the state, coordinating our statewide monthly meeting. And so that's been an interesting experience. If anyone can advise me on collaboration, that
we don't want to talk with Anne about that.
With whom?
With Anne.
With Anne? Okay.
And Anne, why don't we move to you next?
Okay, hi everybody. Ann Schwartzman. I work at the Inside Out Center, and I do a lot of coordination, or attempt to, with the local Philadelphia area as well as across the state, and working with prisons and instructors and universities and whatever stakeholders might be around.
Okay, good to see you. Patty?
Hi, I'm Patty from Melbourne, Australia. I did the Inside Out program, which was facilitated by Marietta in 2017. Sorry, it just froze for a bit. Sorry. So I did I did the Inside Out program in 2017. Marietta facilitated that, and following that, I progressed into the think tank and am now an associate director with Beyond the Stonewalls Advisory Collective, which Marietta leads.
Wonderful. Okay. Good to have you here, given that it's very early for you. Tanya Link.
Hey everyone, Tanya Link. I'm down in Atlanta. I teach at Kennesaw State University, and I'm site director for Common Good Atlanta, which is a carceral incarceration nonprofit. And we are currently in several prisons, and I'm mainly focused on transitional centers and building up to offer Inside Out classes there, and trying to get as many professors trained as possible in the next year, so we can actually call them Inside Out classes and not like we call them new connections right now, because I'm the only one trained. So but our dean is on board, so we're trying to establish a big momentum and movement down here too.
Wonderful. That's I'm really happy to hear that. Jennifer, are you in a place where you can introduce yourself?
Yes, I am Jennifer Kobina Denji. I took my first Inside Out course 2011, and I've been an instructor since 2012. And I'm at Carson City Correctional Facility in Michigan. And I'm currently interested in trying to expand it here in East Lansing, Michigan State. Sorry for my son.
That's all right. It's good to see him. All right. Thanks, Jennifer. And Kenny, can you, are you in your car, did you say? Kenny, can you hear me? Okay. I guess not. All right. So, oh, and he disappeared. Must have been something I said. So Marietta, welcome. And so Marietta is going to take us through the sojourn of the development of no fewer than 6, maybe, what is it, 7, possibly, think tanks in Australia. And it's just, it's an astonishment. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Laurie, and thank you everybody for being here. And it's so nice to see so many familiar faces. And I want to also specifically thank Patty for also being here this morning and spending time with us, because I will be drawing upon her. And she is and has been a big part of this growth and success of Inside Out. And most importantly, she's been doing it all from the goodness of her heart, because we don't receive any funding and we all work as volunteers in this space. So I just want to acknowledge that, because it's absolutely huge. So I think I'll start from the beginning, as you should start, as one would say. And here we are. I hope you can see my screen. Looks a bit messy, but I'll fix it. Can you guys see that? Yep, excellent. Aha. So this is a wonderful flyer which has been created to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. So, and of course, Patty and I worked on creating this flyer. And if it looks a bit messy and busy, it's because of me, not because of Patty. Just putting that out there. So I was trained as an Inside Out instructor back in 2008. After I heard about the program in 2005. So I went to a World Congress in Criminology, which at that time was in Philadelphia. And it was there that I got to spend a day with the Great Effort think tank, and I met Laurie. And I was just absolutely blown away with everything that I learned and what the possibilities were. And mainly what really blew me away was the fact that people in custody were so selfless. They were so giving, they were so engaging. And I thought, how far does one need to dig deep within themselves to really concentrate on creating a better life? And that's it, for other people. And anyhow, it was a turning point in my career, absolutely, that one day. And I actually attended the prison with my father, who accompanied me to the conference. And I turned around and said to him, you know, I have to do this, right? And he said, yeah, I can see it, you know, and it's something that you just feel, you know, inside out. And I know you all have been touched by it. It's just something that you feel. It's not something that you can explain to someone unless they've been through it and unless they have actually seen it in action at least. So that made my life a lot easier, because I then had the support of my family. And, you know, whenever things got really tough for the next 8 years, me trying to, you know, introduce this program down under, there was always, you know, blockages. The university was basically saying, oh, you know, what are these, you know, manipulative people in prison going to teach our young impressionable women, you know, who are usually in our program. So it was just ridiculous arguments like that are very hard to turn around and explain. And at the same time, in corrections, the arguments were mostly around, they can't do this. You know, this is a university subject. People in prison, you know, have grade 8 education, they're never going to be able to do this. And it was time and time again that was just, all going in a circle. And I think it was really the point where I was about to give up and think, well, this will never happen. Just, go ahead with it. And I even considered moving to the US at one point because I was so upset that I couldn't do this. And I'm like, I'll move if Laurie will have me. Anyhow, then in 2013, Laurie comes down to Sydney and reaches out and says, I'm actually coming to a neighboring state to where you are. Do you want to, meet up? And I said, of course. And she says, what's happening? And I'm like, oh, don't ask, I'm about to give up and blah, blah, blah. And she said, well, I'm meeting with the person who finished Inside Out training in Sydney. Why don't you come up and we have a conversation? Anyway, when I saw Laurie, my whole, I suppose, passion was reignited in that moment. And I thought, and Laurie was the one, and I said, I was complaining to Laurie, about how it's all been going and how it's terrible and all the rest. And Laurie said, I think you should give it another go. You didn't actually approach them for the last 18 months. So they've had a bit of a break from you, really wise advice, right? And anyway, so I did, and the way I said it to the deputy commissioner at the time, I said, I saw him at an event, right? And I said, oh, well, it looks like the neighboring state, New South Wales, is going to beat us to it. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, that program that I've been, banging on about for the last, 6 years. I said, well, they're introducing it. They've worked through all their risks. And he turned around and said, well, you better come into my office then next week. And that was it, right? And I went completely unprepared, because I'd been shut down so many times. I almost forgot how the program actually worked, right? I turn up to his office the next week, a few days later, and there's no more talking. He says, this is my assistant. She had a title, right? Some important title. She's going to make this happen for you. We've already allocated 2 prisons where you're going to go. I was astonished. Like I couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. Okay. So at this time, of course, I'm like, I've got to get the university now on board. Like, wow, what's going to happen now? Like, I've got to make this really quick. Anyway, so then the university started creating all kinds of problems. And then I'm like, you know what? The MOU has been signed. So I was lucky, right? Because I somehow got the MOU signed before I got the dean's support. It was just one of those weird things, right? That sometimes just happen because they just had to happen, right? Anyhow, I started teaching in 2015 at a men's prison and a women's prison. And it's a pilot. And I actually, didn't really want 2 prisons, but corrections said, you're having 2 prisons, see you later, and stop talking about it. You'll tell us what's happening later on, right? Anyway, I go on and I'm teaching 2 parallel programs. The men's program is going beautifully, right? We are connecting, we are sharing, everything is going wonderfully. The women hate me. Patty's laughing because Patty's never heard this story. I always introduce new stories.
Well, really? I've never heard this, no.
You haven't, and that's why I'm telling you. So there are little groups, people are in little groups, and I approach and they stop talking. I'm like, what's going on? Something's not right, right? And week after week after week after week, same thing. Whereas the class at the men's facility is just growing, going from one strength to the next, to the next, to the next. The women, not so much. Anyway, so at week 6, I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore because this is just getting too hard. I don't want to be somewhere where people don't want me, right? And I had a really good PhD supervisor at the time. And I spoke to her about it. I said, you know what? This is what's happening, right? She had very good practical experience. And she said to me, you know what? Incarceration affects women differently. They will love you a lot more than the guys. You got to give it time. Leaving is not an option. You got to go with it. As you keep going, they are the ones that are going to stay with you. The guys are all going to leave. I thought, okay, fine. So of course I kept going. I wasn't really considering leaving, by the way, but I was thinking about it. Anyhow, God, I learned a lot that semester. Huge lessons. Anyway, come week 9, I'm at the women's prison and we watch a Louis Theroux video about Philadelphia. Some of you may have seen it. It's a horrific video, right? Very, very personal. Personally affects you. And anyway, we were all crying, at the conclusion of this video. And it was at that point, it was the turning point. I mean, talk about the connection with Philadelphia and all this, right? It's just incredible. The women from that point start thinking, she might be all right. Maybe she's going to stick by. So that was the turning point with the women's prison. At the end of that semester, the women say, aren't we going into a think tank? And I went, what? You want a think tank with me? Like, yeah, the one you talked about that exists in Philadelphia or somewhere where it's all, created organically. And I'm like, what? So complete turnaround. And yeah, like I said, that was the first think tank established in 2015. And that was where Patty attended later on, that particular Inside Out program and that particular think tank. But that offering was evaluated with excellent results. And then that has grown to the Inside Out being offered at 8 different prisons. From those 8, there are 6 that are constantly in the mix. And then the other 2, we swap and change. So that is Inside Out. It has had more than 800 graduates. Here we go. To date. So it's the only program that actually has kept on going during COVID, online though. So it is really well regarded by corrections. There's no doubt in my mind about that. Some of the prisons are high risk, some are medium risk, some are low risk, some are protection prisons, some are in country areas, some are more local. Like I said, men's, women's, all completely different. And, every semester is different, every year is different. That's just how it is.
Let me ask you a question. How many, you have 8 facilities listed there. How many of them are women's facilities?
2.
Okay.
And there are only 2 prisons that are women's in the state.
And the state that you're in is, just remind us what the state is.
It's Victoria.
Okay.
Victoria, with the capital city of Melbourne.
Okay.
So organically, this has led to 6 prison-based think tanks, and here they are. So then these names are repeated where the think tanks are. So they were all established between 2015 and 2019. And yeah, they've been wonderful. As you all know, how think tanks are. They just grow and grow. They are quite different to think tanks and how they operate in the US because our sentences are so much shorter. So much shorter. So there is a lot more transition inside prisons, in and out, and it's actually difficult to find people who are there on a long term in order for them to be consistent members of the think tanks. But that's okay. Each time an Inside Out program is taught, basically new members come into the think tank, others leave. That's just how it is. So we have had more than 100 stakeholder consultations. So in these think tanks, when I put approvals through to establish these think tanks, everybody said, I'll let her do whatever she wants, you know, who cares kind of thing. And 10 years ago, I saw the power of lived experience and what it can offer for policies. And in the last probably 3 years, more like 2 years, the voice of lived experience has become hugely important in our system. And that is, I believe, mainly because of the work of the think tanks. So we have, and I'll give you some examples on what we have been consulted on, but they are incredible. For example, things like humanizing induction process into custody. I mean, revamping the entire process of reception into custody based on people with lived experience. I mean, it's just so powerful when you work on projects like that. And that project came from head office of corrections to Beyond the Stonewalls. We want to humanize the process of reception. Help us. Incredible stuff, right? Then also what we've been working on with courts, Victoria, is they are building a brand new court, children's court, magistrates court, and something else is in the mix, isn't it, Patty? VCAT, which is Victorian Tribunal.
Yeah.
Anyhow, a huge building, and we have been consulted for the last 18 months on what this building should look like, but also what this building should feel like for people with lived experience. You know, we've been talking about what should be in the custody center, what should be in the cells. You know, we are now talking to them about the art. We are actually going to be contracted to produce art or murals or something like that for the actual custody space to make people calmer, to make people, you know, more likely to, you know, stay focused, I suppose, and, you know, not lose it, as they say.
Let me ask another question, Marietta. So the think tanks have been approached to do all this work. It's not like you came up with something and submitted it. That's astonishing.
I know.
How do
I
you
know.
explain that?
Initially, we were submitting stuff. That's how we started. So we would write things like, you know, reports about whatever the men wanted or the women. So initially it was, what do we feel is missing? So we could say, so the women would say things like, the induction process and the induction booklet that is given to women at reception is completely inadequate. It's just a policy document, 40 pages that makes sense to nobody, goes into the bin straight away. So we then sat down and we, you know, rewrote the entire booklet, spoke to the prison management and said, hey, listen, we had a go at redeveloping or redesigning this booklet in a way that it makes sense, in language that is understandable, with pictures, whatever. And that's how we started, bit by bit, by getting people on side, thinking that actually this makes some sense. And so we've just built reputation for ourselves, to be honest. We've also put in submissions into inquiries. So whenever any kind of inquiry occurs, we put submissions. So there've been, I don't know, 10 different inquiries, and we've worked all together. This is really important. So all the think tanks work on every single inquiry, and then we summarize all the work together. And we submit it like that to Parliament, to an inquiry, to whatever. So most recently, there was a really substantial inquiry into the culture of correctional staff. And it found, surprise, surprise, lots of problems, corruption, you know, you name it, disrespect, you know, all the things that, you know, people who work in prisons and have been to prison already know and don't find it as a surprise at all. But where we stand apart is two things from all the other advocacy groups, and I say this very proudly. We are based on storytelling. So everything is through storytelling, where we get people's empathy. Number two, we provide solutions. We are just not about, it's very important, just bitching about all the things that are wrong, because we all know there are so many things that are wrong and inadequate. But we are about finding solutions together with stakeholders. So usually what happens, like in this particular case of, say, humanizing the induction process into custody, we actually, this was one of the best projects, but anyway, so there is this $1 billion prison that this state has built, which has been sitting empty for the last year because our numbers in custody have gone down for the last 4 years. So this empty prison has been used for training. And when they said they wanted, beyond the Stonewalls Advisory Collective, which is a community-based think tank, to provide advice on humanizing the process, they said, why don't you guys all come over and visit the prison? So can you imagine people on parole, people who've been in custody, going back into prison, watching somebody being recepted into custody, and then taking notes and then providing feedback on how that process can be improved. And I'm going to get Patty to talk about that, what that was like for her as a project. So we had to think about, and my job is to think about the safety and security for my group. So I think about, is this going to be traumatizing for them? How are we going to have a pre-briefing, a post-briefing, and how are we going to provide support for the people? And corrections worked with us the whole way. The whole way. Patty, do you want to talk a little bit about what that project was like for you? And what did you think about it when it was just mentioned?
I just couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe we were actually being consulted on it, to be honest. And it was funny because when we went to the actual location, or actually when we first started the process and started the meeting, I was kind of shocked that one of the prison supervisors, who was my supervisor at DPSC, was part of this process. So it was like, a bit sort of, I was a bit sort of taken aback. But what I really appreciated is that they were so open to feedback, and it was really a collaborative effort by everybody. So it was a little bit unexpected for me. But I think that they really took on our feedback on board and have subsequently made some tweaks to the reception process. So it's, for us, a huge win, because what's happened recently is they're closing they've just announced they're closing 2 prisons and moving a lot of those inmates into this empty prison now. So that's really, do we want another prison built? No, but I think it's a really, really good outcome, because Port Phillip is really run down and they're going into a brand new sort of facility there. But yeah, that's what I would say about that kind of experience. But it's not just, we've done so many consultations with Corrections Victoria on other projects, and they've just been as impactful as that one, I would say.
Staff in head office, in sort of, who manage the entire custodial operations, make comments like, I always learn so much when I speak to this group. I'm always inspired to do more and to be better and to push myself. It's like, what more could you really want? It's such a difficult, as you know, space to make any progress in, but it's certainly been happening. So I just want to then talk a little bit about Beyond the Stonewalls Advisory Collective, because that's been our, big thriving moment in the last 5 years. And, mainly due to the work that Patty has been doing together with myself. And we do have a whole team of volunteers, of course. But we basically continue on with stakeholder consultations, so whatever they may be about. But we also work with banks, financial institutions, medical providers, whoever wants to hear about the plight of people coming out of custody, what issues they have and how they can better support them, they come and approach us. Most often they actually approach corrections, and then corrections tell them, oh, go and speak to this group. They're ready to go.
Because
So
we've got a quite diverse group as well.
yeah,
Men and women. Yeah.
So what happens is same, exactly like we've been, inside out leads to prison-based think tanks and then community-based think tanks. We do now have a few people who haven't come through this channel. So that has been, a challenge for us, how to integrate them and how to, get them up to speed as quickly as we can. But we have a newsletter. We have art workshops and exhibitions that happen every 2 weeks. They are amazing, these art workshops. We have a podcast. We have a collaboration with Humans of St. Quentin called A Moment in Time. So this is coming up. And we've got another 2 projects that we're going to also add to the list. So we are always really busy, really engaged, but you can look us up. It's bswac.net. So bswac.net is our website. And most of our stuff is there. Corrections Victoria love our website, and they are going to whitelist our website so that people in prison can also see this website. So that's really exciting. But it does mean that we have to, be careful what we put up and what we post, and we just have to always, be politically correct. But at least in that sort of public space. However, I feel very confident in saying whatever the group needs to say or wants to say at any consultation that we have ever had. We've never had to hold back. We've always been able to say it as it is, basically. So we have a consultation coming up next week, and that is related to, actually, I'll take a step back because this is such a wonderful story. So Corrections Victoria partnered up with Employment Services Victoria in a project. So this was a government project, joint project on working better ways to find employment for people coming out of custody. And they approached me some maybe 18 months ago and said, we have all these jobs that we are advertising in the prisons, yet nobody is going for the jobs. I said, isn't that interesting? I said, do they have jobs to go to? I knew the answer, of course. And they're like, no, they don't have any jobs to go to. They don't want to build skills. They don't want to even look at the jobs that we advertise for them. Why is that? I said, what a wonderful set of questions that you have just posed. Why don't you come to the think tank and find out the answers? So they did, and they were astonished. They almost fell off their chair, right? Because what the men and the women were saying is, I think it's a lie. I think I would never be able to get that job. I don't want to set myself up for failure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, and they were like, we never thought of that. And then the men are like, and the women, all we see and hear are failures, people coming back into the system. We never hear about people who actually end up, earning $100,000 doing XYZ job. That never actually happens in reality. Anyway, so lo and behold, this has led to members of Beyond the Stonewalls actually being trained and going back into prisons, wait for this, going back into prisons, talking about their transition, successful transition, and their own pathways. And being paid quite good money for doing it. And Patty can talk about that because she's been doing that. Patty?
Yes, it was, yeah, we initially did some training with Marietta, and then were invited to go to one of the, well, I mean, there'd been subsequent invitations, but initially another BSWAC member and I went to a men's prison, and we were invited there to speak about challenges around employment to a group of males that were exiting the shortly exiting the system. And we were welcomed with open arms. The officers there were really engaging with us, really supportive of the program. It was such a different experience to, you know, because I spent time in custody, and then doing this was surreal, really, to go back into, because I can tell you now, with me looking for employment, I've been hiding the fact that I was hiding the fact that I spent time in custody, and to be free to talk about it, and to talk about the challenges around it, was, you know, really, really freeing for me. And on top of that, to actually be paid to do this, and to be paid really, really well, in that setting. And I felt really, really valued with what I had experienced and through my storytelling. But I also have to acknowledge the fact that I think the men really, really received it well and got something out of it. So that was, you know, really why we were there, and it was a huge bonus, huge takeaway.
And, you know, this has never happened in this
Never.
entire system. Never. And, you know, and then it's not just people who have been released and have finished their parole. There are people still on parole going back into prison, giving these, you know, stories, you know, or talking about their journeys of exiting the system. It's just been absolutely remarkable.
And
yeah.
Good.
oh, no.
Go, Patty.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, I'm actually in a role as well, with a non-profit organisation called AXO, and I work as a forensic lived experience worker. And that would never have happened either, and that would never have happened had I not gone through this journey with the Inside Out program. And I am in this role helping men who are transitioning out into who have post-release support to men who have spent time in custody and are going through this program. Now, it's a well-paid job for someone that's had lived experience, and they're using my experience. I'm again, you know, being paid for it, being acknowledged as a valued member of that team. And it's kind of one of the first in, I think, in Victoria. And it all, you know, goes back to the Inside Out program, the think tank beyond the Stonewalls Advisory Collective. And like I said, it would never, ever have happened in the past. It's really, this program is so transformative on many levels.
So this is amazing. I have a couple of questions. I'm always thinking about money. And, you know, Marietta, before you had said, I think you had said that there wasn't any funding involved. Maybe I misheard you. So, you
There's
know,
none.
say it again.
There is none. Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, you have this website, you have all the things you listed earlier on. And I'm just wondering, is that all done by volunteers?
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're looking at two of them as you speak, who do the vast majority of that, all that work.
Got it. Got it.
I
Well,
mean, we
that
do it
is,
after hours.
Yeah.
We'll get up early, like whatever it takes.
Yeah.
And not just me, not just Marietta, the whole group. It's
right.
really a collaborative effort, but also BSWAC offers a sense of community for people that have just come out of the system, who have lost a lot of friends and family along the way. And it provides them a sense of community, a sense of purpose. We're all in there for the right reasons. I mean, Marietta does a fabulous job of vetting people into the program, and not one person is there for the wrong reason. We're all there to achieve the same thing, to change things in the system and provide better outcomes for people who are going through that journey like we did.
But do listen to our podcast and you will hear more. Put a bit of
Even
a
that, like, all of
Yeah.
that's done by volunteers, and you know, we rely on people having equipment, and we just put a call out to people, and if there's something that they're really passionate about, then you know, Marietta fosters that and builds their skills in that area. You know, we had recently Mark, who's a former Inside Out student. He conducted a workshop on public speaking, because that's his strength there. And we had a huge turnout and got so much out of that, because we're doing so much more with more public speaking. There's so many more opportunities, and we're really building that for people in this space.
But we are also have been in the last couple of years moving into educating the community, let's call it that, about crime and justice. We feel like, you know, there's no point speaking to the converted already, you know, because we're all we all agree with one another very much about, you know, crime and justice and punishment and all the issues and, you know, topics related. But we have really been putting ourselves out there doing, you know, panel speeches, being parts of these events, like big events where people are invited to come in and just listen. And that has been really, really difficult, let me say. And it's been difficult because it's very emotionally draining. You know, people share a lot of themselves in these stories, but I think it's unforgettable for people. Absolutely unforgettable, incredible. So we are very much also concentrating on that whole aspect of social change. We also have run 2 art exhibitions where we have had, you know, different mixes of people. We've had hundreds of people attend those. So we are very much about, you know, doing so many different things, just trying to, you know, get the word out there that, you know, people deserve another chance. You know, we need to be humanizing, not excluding, you know, all those, you know, things that you already all know about. But for the first time, the university where I work, they are interested in supporting this work further. So hopefully they will work together with me, or they are already working with me, to get some philanthropic funding to support these projects, because they really need support and opportunity to grow. So that's where we are at.
And Mariette, I have one other question for you specifically. This is all you do, right?
No, I do other things.
Oh, I thought you only taught Inside Out.
No, I teach another 2 subjects.
Oh my God. and do all of this.
Yeah, and I have
Uh-huh.
PhD students and honors and all that, of course.
Jeez. Okay, so I've dominated the questioning. So what kinds of questions or thoughts do people have?
I have some thoughts, a lot of them. This was really an incredible presentation. Sometimes I think we don't realize that it takes time for a beacon to really come to its full force. And over these years, everything that you've described is absolutely amazing. In this work where people are coming at it for different reasons and where administrations change and justice policies are not consistent and public opinion may be for or against, to be able to be consistent in doing the work is not easy. And your presentation is amazing. I'm so inspired. I, in other work in this realm, in education and criminal justice, working with agencies, government agencies, or even private nonprofits who are not necessarily on track or will give, sort of spin your wheels and not go anywhere is not uncommon, and it's so hard to stay the course. But you have done that, and the example that you set, in spite of the uncertainty of it all, you stayed on course, and look who you have become in your country and for the people who you're serving. It's amazing. So thank you.
That's very kind. That's very kind. Thank you for all those really kind words, Joe. That's really kind. What's good news is that 3 other states in Australia are very interested to do the same. And the best part is that the interest is coming from correctional departments. It's not coming from the universities.
Wow.
So that's very telling.
So how would that be, like, how would that be facilitated in terms of, would the corrections people then approach some universities, or would you get involved in helping that to happen?
I've been helping them. I've been telling them what we've been doing, creating a bit of a pathway for what they could do and finding appropriate people for them.
Great.
Yeah, that's how it's been going. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it's very exciting that there is this recognition that this is something that's definitely worthwhile. So it's, yeah, it's huge.
What else what other thoughts do people have, or questions?
I did have a question. Thank you, Marietta, for the presentation. I was wondering, so and I may have missed this. So do you also include outside students as part of the think tank?
That's a great question. Yes, absolutely. But there's not many of them.
There's not many, sure.
Yeah, maybe they make 5 to 10% of prison-based think tanks. However, in the community-based think tank, wow, they make 50%, I would say, right, Patty?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the biggest bulk is there. And I put all my PhD students, it's like a mandatory requirement. Guess what? That's what you're doing.
That's actually smart.
They're really the outside students with BSWAC. They're very engaged in it. They're very we've worked on the same the same sort of things. They've attended all the workshops with us. It's just on an even sort of playing field. We don't we're like a united group. So yeah, it's just a lovely organization, and they're really supportive, and we don't talk. What I really love about it is we don't sort of talk about people's crimes. We've got something in common where we're there for the right reasons, and there to put egos aside and advocate for people entangled in the criminal justice system, essentially.
How far I'm sorry, how far are you guys from the prison? How far is the institution from the prison?
There are 8 different prisons. So some are 30 minutes from the city, and then others are 3 hours away. So it just depends, Jennifer.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I've served as a facilitator for Inside Out for years, but haven't done a think tank for a couple of reasons. One, I'm the only instructor, but then two, the prison is an hour away, and like on top of, our job as professors, right? And then it's adding the think tank. I need at least one other person to assist, but I mean, the commute is always an issue, but so I was just curious. Thank you.
Yep. I just couldn't possibly imagine leaving people behind after Inside Out. I just couldn't do it, no matter what. It wouldn't even matter, nothing else matters at that point when people say, are we going into a think tank, I can't say we're not. How can I say that? I just couldn't.
Well,
It's
I'm
just-
glad you never moved to America.
Thank you, Patty.
I'm-
But
I'm also glad. Mhm.
Yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say, I'm also glad that I don't have to hide who I am anymore because of you. And I'm free to just, I started off, thinking I was going to enroll in I enrolled in a Bachelor of Arts degree in Spanish and linguistics. And I had this grand idea of coming out and teaching Spanish and, leaving prison and jail life behind. And I have to thank you for this, for changing my life, and it's really it's ignited this like passion for me and a purpose. And I think it's done that not just for me, but people that are involved in, the think tanks and BSWAC.
Thank you, Patty. And I thank Laurie for changing my life and giving my life a purpose.
Well, you really should thank the Greaterford think tank, because that's really where it started, Yeah.
You were the match. You were the match that ignited that. So
whatever.
let's just remember that. Yeah.
I'm curious how, with all of those think tanks, you said that they all work on all the projects. So how do you, without getting too much into the weeds, but how do you do that?
So there's a consultation coming up. Say, for example, the next one that Corrections Victoria have asked us to look at is titled, "Why are less people applying for parole and more are choosing straight release from custody?" So what I have done is the next 6 think tanks at each of the locations are going to be focused on this conversation. I'm going to bring together all the thoughts in a report, send it to them.
Wow. It's amazing. It's really amazing. We probably need to wrap up soon, but does anybody else have any thoughts or questions that they want to, Leanne?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, thanks, Marietta. It was so inspiring. I just wanted to know, do you know a colleague, Adele Sefton Ralston? I don't know which part of Australia she works in, but I think she's really interested in, she's a professor, I think, of Indigenous literature, and I met her at Bard, but maybe I could connect you two. I don't know if that would be good. And then one last thing, I wanted to find out just a little bit more about what you were going to be doing with, did you say with San Quentin? I wanted to hear about that collaboration a little bit more. And if you could speak, if we have time, just a little bit about the political sort of negotiating you do, because you said that, you have to kind of be politically correct, but because you're so public and you're doing so many, variant programming, what are some of those things that you straddle in terms of political, with the Department of Corrections?
Those are wonderful questions, and thank you for your questions. And yes, please do make the introduction with the Indigenous professor. Wow, the politics is a hard one. So we are in an election year. I know you can all associate with that, but on a different level. But for us, it's a state election, and state elections really matter here because they actually guide corrections process in the state, and the budget and all the rest. And at the moment, we have a non-conservative government, and we've had it for 4 terms, and it's highly likely that there will be a change of government, which is what we're very fearful of, because it will mean, you know, a more conservative government will mean lots of cuts, and lots of taking away of lots of, you know, really good things for us. This is meaning for us, not my personal preference. My personal preference doesn't matter here. But what is happening at the moment is that corrections departments are very worried about what is in the paper, what is printed, what is said. And we've just been told we're all like, lay low, don't do anything, don't bring attention to yourselves. Let's just try and fly under the radar. And I always teach the group, we are on social media, we are on everything these days, because Patty keeps on pushing me to do this. But I check everything and I triple check, and you know, we work really well together to just make sure that we don't do the wrong thing, because one little wrong thing could mean that it's all gone. And I remind people of this all the time. And I know I sometimes sound like a broken record, but I feel like I have to. So, and it's a struggle, you know, it's very debilitating to have to do this, but I know I have to do it. But I was really glad that, you know, Patty and Coral and Kate accompanied me last year to the 25th anniversary and heard firsthand how wonderful programs have been closed just because of stupidity, let's call it, right? But, you know, they've started to understand just how complicated and fragile, let's use the word fragile, everything that we do is. And what was the first question? I'm so sorry, Leanne.
I was just going to ask you a little bit about your collaboration with San Quentin, like just in terms of, you know, the very different cultures, say, between you and San Francisco. Like, how are you working together?
Yeah, so I met Diane Kahn, who's the CEO of Humans of San Quentin, and seen her work of humanizing people in custody. And she said, why don't we do something together? So Patty and I and another outside student have been, I suppose, changing some of that ideology, making it less personal so that we can actually do the same thing. So yeah, it's so exciting. Pretty much the same thing without identifying people, telling people where they are incarcerated, putting their sentence up, you know, all those things that Corrections Victoria would have a problem with, we've taken away, but we still want to humanize people in custody because we feel like it's really important.
Well, anybody have any last words? Kenny, you haven't said anything. Do you have any thoughts?
I think the presentation was amazing. I love to hear about, you know, them having people involved with the lived experience after incarceration and this reentry process that they're doing, providing jobs for this population. I think that's amazing. Other than that, you know, I'm just grateful to hear the story. And I would like to see the recording because I was on the road, and if I can get a full, you know, picture of what actually was said. I was listening, but I wasn't able to look at the slides. But I'm really interested in this workshop, in this presentation. So thank you for all the great work you're doing in Australia, and I'm honored to be a part of this Inside Out.
Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you,
Sue?
Kenny.
Yeah. Hi, Kenny. How are ya? Good to see you. Well, if Kenny Butler says you're good, then you're so good. Okay. Because Kenny Butler is amazing. He's a one-man amazing, like, person. I just want to say that I had the good fortune to teach an online Inside Out class, and Patty and a couple of other folks from Australia were folks to be in my class. And one thing that I thought was really lovely is that there's also, because this work is hard and so draining, that they have ways to connect with each other and sort of refresh themselves and do things sort of outside of everything. And I thought, you know, well, I know Marietta's a genius and she must sleep like an hour a night, but and still looks so chic. I can't figure out how she does it, but really, you know, but that the thing that Patty talked about, and I'm sorry, Kay and the other folks who were in the class, that the ways you get together and renew yourselves through art and music and just, joy. And somehow you find the joy in all this. And I think that's something we all could emulate in all of our different areas and find ways to connect and bring joy and support each other more, which is very hard to do when you're so incredibly busy, but you guys do it so brilliantly. So I just want to say hats off to you. And I think it's wonderful.
Nice. Thank you,
Thank you.
sir. Well, all right. This has been just amazing. I mean, I feel like I knew the basics of it, but getting much more of the story, the background, and all of that, and what you all are doing, connected to the government is stunning. And I so hope that it doesn't go too far in a bad direction, so that you'll be able to continue. I mean, we're hoping for that here as well, as you know.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you all. And
Thank you for having us.
yes, and we'll be in touch about the next upcoming Zoom. All right. So take care, everybody.